When the Spanish soldiers first saw Tenochtitlan, they thought they were hallucinating. One of them, Bernal Diaz del Castillo, wrote in his journal, "We were amazed, and we said it was like the enchanted things they tell of in the Book of Amadis." Some of our soldiers asked whether it was not all a dream. It was not a dream. It was the greatest city in the Western Hemisphere. The capital of an empire that had been building for 500 years. An empire that controlled 250,000 square kilometers. An empire of millions. And its emperor was about to say 3 words that would end all of it. November 8, 1519. The causeway of Iztapalapa. On one side, Hernán Cortés, a Spanish conquistador with 500 soldiers, 16 horses, and a few small cannons. A man who had burned his own ships on the Mexican coast to prevent his men from retreating. On the other side, the most powerful ruler in the Western Hemisphere, Moctezuma Xocoyotzin, Moctezuma the Younger. 9th Tlatoani of Tenochtitlan, emperor of the most powerful civilization in the Americas. He stepped down from his litter. He walked toward the Spanish commander. And according to the accounts that survive, through Malinche's translation, through Cortez's letters, through Aztec oral histories, he said, "You have arrived." 3 words. In Nahuatl. Translated through a young woman standing between 2 worlds. You have arrived. Not, halt or I will destroy you. Not, you are not welcome here. Not even, who are you, and what do you want? You have arrived. The words of a man opening a door. A door that would never close again. But to understand why a man of absolute power said those words, why the greatest emperor in the Americas welcomed the men who would destroy him, we have to go back. 500 years back. To the beginning of everything he was trying to protect. The people who built Tenochtitlan did not begin as conquerors. They began as refugees. In the 12th and 13th centuries, the Mexica people migrated south into the Valley of Mexico, a land already populated, already organized, already politically complex. They were newcomers. Outsiders. For generations they served as mercenaries for more powerful city-states, valued for their ferocity in battle but looked down upon for their lack of civilization. In 1325, on a swampy island that no one else wanted, they founded Tenochtitlan. Over 2 centuries, through alliance, conquest, and extraordinary engineering, they transformed a swamp into a metropolis. They built causeways across the lake. Aqueducts carrying fresh water to a city surrounded by brackish lake water. A system of chinampas, floating agricultural gardens, that fed hundreds of thousands of people on land that did not technically exist before they made it. In 1428, less than a century before Cortés arrived, the Mexica formed the Triple Alliance with 2 neighboring city-states. And then they began to conquer. Within 3 generations, the Triple Alliance, what we now call the Aztec Empire, controlled territory stretching from the Pacific coast to the Gulf of Mexico. From modern-day Guatemala to the edge of the northern deserts. Hundreds of city-states paid tribute. The market at Tlatelolco handled 60,000 transactions a day, larger and more organized than any market in contemporary Europe. Tenochtitlan was not just a city. It was a statement. A declaration by a people who had arrived as refugees and become, within 2 centuries, the center of the known world, and then, in 1502, a new emperor took the throne. His name was Moctezuma II. And he inherited the most powerful empire in the Americas at what appeared to be its absolute peak. What he could not know was that he had also inherited its most dangerous moment. The Aztec Empire had a structural problem that no emperor had managed to solve. Its power was built on tribute. And tribute requires constant, credible threat. The empire's military system was built around the concept of the flower war, ritual combat designed to capture enemies for sacrifice rather than destroy them completely. This meant that the Aztec approach to conquest was not extermination. It was domination. Pay your tribute. Provide your sacrifices. Acknowledge Tenochtitlan's supremacy. And live. This system worked. Until it didn't. Tlaxcala was not alone. Across the empire, conquered peoples paid their tribute with the specific hatred of people who have no choice. The Totonac on the Gulf Coast. The Huexinca to the east. Dozens of city-states that paid what they owed and waited, for anything, for anyone, that might give them a different option. Moctezuma too understood this. He had spent his reign trying to manage it, expanding the empire further, conducting more flower wars, demanding more tribute, building higher the pyramid of power that his predecessors had constructed. But there was something else troubling him. Something that defied military solution. Something that his priests and his calendar and his god seemed to be warning him about. The year 1519, in the Aztec calendar, was the year 1 reed. Suacatl. The year associated with Quetzalcoatl, the feathered serpent god who had sailed east and promised, in the foundational myths of Mesoamerica, to one day return. In April of 1519, the year 1 reed, strange men arrived on the eastern coast. From the east. On what appeared, to those who saw them first, to be floating temples. And they were led by a man with pale skin and a beard. Whether Moctezuma truly believed Cortés was Quetzalcoatl returned, historians have debated this for 5 centuries. The answer is almost certainly more complex than a simple yes or no. But here is what we know for certain. Moctezuma hesitated. And in that hesitation, measured in weeks and months as Cortés marched inland, gathering allies, recruiting the empire's enemies. The fate of 500 years was being decided. Hernán Cortés was not a great general in the conventional sense. He had 500 soldiers, 16 horses, and a few cannon. Against an empire of millions, with a warrior class that had been training for combat since childhood. On paper, he should have died within weeks of landing. What Cortés had, beyond his soldiers, beyond his weapons, was something far more dangerous. He had Malinche. Her real name is lost to history. We call her Malinche, or Dona Marina in Spanish accounts. She was young. She had been enslaved. She had survived by being extraordinarily intelligent in a world that offered enslaved women almost no margin for error. And she became, arguably, the single most important person in the conquest of the Americas. Through Malinche, Cortés learned what no previous Spanish explorer had understood. The Aztec Empire was not a unified nation of loyal subjects. It was a collection of subjugated peoples waiting for a reason to rebel. At Sempoala, the Totonac told him about their tribute. About their resentment. About every city-state that seethed under Aztec domination. At Tlaxcala, after 4 ferocious battles that nearly destroyed his small force, the Tlaxcalans made a calculation. The Spanish were dangerous. But the Aztec were the enemy they had lived under for generations. By the time Cortés reached the causeway of Iztapalapa, he was not leading 500 Spaniards. He was leading thousands of warriors from peoples the Aztec Empire had spent generations oppressing. The greatest weapon in the conquest of the Aztec Empire was not Spanish steel or Spanish gunpowder. It was Aztec cruelty, remembered by the people who had survived it. And waiting for all of them, on the other end of that causeway, was an emperor trying to understand something his civilization had never prepared him to face. The debate about what Moctezuma was thinking in this moment has consumed historians for 5 centuries. Was he genuinely uncertain whether Cortés was a returning deity? Was he playing for time, observing this strange force, learning its weaknesses, planning a response? Was he simply acting according to the protocols of Aztec diplomacy, which required the greeting of powerful visitors with formal welcome? We will never know with certainty. Because the records we have come primarily from two sources, Spanish accounts, filtered through the priorities of conquerors writing their own history, and Aztec accounts recorded years later, after the conquest had already happened and the survivors were trying to make sense of what had gone wrong. Both sets of records have their reasons to distort. What we know is this. Moctezuma welcomed Cortés into Tenochtitlan. He housed the Spanish force in the palace of his father. He conducted himself as a host. And Cortés, within 7 days of entering the city as a guest, took Moctezuma prisoner. The specifics of how this happened are disputed. What is not disputed is the result. The most powerful man in the Americas was held under effective house arrest in his own palace, his commands to his people now filtered through his captors, his authority visibly, catastrophically compromised. The Aztec world was built on the absolute authority of the Tlatoani. His word was law. His person was sacred. His legitimacy was the foundation of everything the empire rested on. And now, he was a hostage. Moctezuma died in June 1520. The man who had said 3 words, "You have arrived," died in the palace of his fathers, in the city his ancestors had built from a swamp. A prisoner in his own empire. But the empire did not die with him. Not yet. What happened next was something the Spanish had not planned for. And something that shows exactly how wrong the story of a simple conquest really is. La Noche Triste. The Night of Sorrows. June 30th, 1520. When the Aztec people of Tenochtitlan finally rose against their Spanish occupiers, they nearly destroyed them completely. The Spanish lost perhaps 600 men that night. Thousands of their Tlaxcalan allies. Almost all of their cannons. Their horses. Their supplies. Cortés, according to accounts, sat under a tree and wept. The Aztec had won the battle. Decisively. Devastatingly. And then, in one of the most consequential decisions in the history of the Americas, they did not pursue. Why? The reasons are still debated. Ritual constraints. Political confusion in the aftermath of Moctezuma's death. The devastating arrival of smallpox, a disease the Aztec had no immunity to, killing tens of thousands of Tenochtitlan's defenders in the weeks following La Noche Triste, including the new Emperor Cuitlahuac. Smallpox. The weapon no Aztec warrior could fight. The weapon no sacrifice could appease. The weapon that arrived on Spanish ships and spread through a population with no immunity, killing somewhere between a third and half of Tenochtitlan's people in the months between La Noche Triste and the final siege. The final siege lasted 80 days. The last emperor, Cuauhtémoc, young, defiant, extraordinary, held the city against overwhelming force. His people were starving. Dying of disease. Outnumbered by the combined forces of every city-state that had spent generations resenting Aztec tribute. They held anyway. When Cuauhtémoc was finally captured, trying to escape by canoe, Cortés asked him where the Aztec gold was hidden. Cuauhtémoc gestured to his own body, the body of a man who had been tortured by having his feet held over fire. And said, according to the accounts, "I am not in a bed of roses." August 13th, 1521. Tenochtitlan fell. 500 years of Mexica civilization, ended. The Spanish did not just conquer the Aztec Empire. They erased its physical existence. The pyramids were demolished. The temples burned. The manuscripts, the records of an entire civilization's history, science, and religion, destroyed in fires that their own bishops ordered and their own priests lit. In 1562, a Spanish bishop named Diego de Landa burned thousands of Mayan manuscripts in a single afternoon. He wrote, without apparent remorse, "We found a large number of books written with their characters, and as they contained nothing in which there was not superstition and lies of the devil, we burned them all." The devil. That is what they called 500 years of human knowledge. In 1978, workers digging a utility trench in downtown Mexico City hit something unexpected. Stone. Carved stone. 8 tons of it. It was a monolith depicting Coyolxauhqui, the moon goddess. A masterpiece of Aztec sculpture, carved around 1500 AD, buried under the city that was built to replace the civilization that made it. The excavation that followed revealed the Templo Mayor, the Great Pyramid of Tenochtitlan, perfectly preserved beneath the streets of Mexico City. The city built to erase it was, in the end, protecting it. Here is what the story of Moctezuma's 3 words teaches us. Not about the Spanish. Not about the Aztec. But about all of us. Moctezuma did not fall because he was weak. He fell because his civilization had built its power on a foundation that cracked at the decisive moment. An empire held together by tribute and fear rather than loyalty. A military system built for ritual warfare, not existential defense. A political structure so centered on the absolute authority of one man that when that man was compromised, the system had no way to respond. And a leader who, at the most critical moment in his civilization's history, chose welcome over caution. Not from stupidity, but from a worldview that had no category for what was standing in front of him. The Aztec Empire is gone. But the people are not. Millions of Mexicans today carry Nahuatl surnames, speak words from a language the Spanish tried to erase, eat food grown from seeds the empire cultivated, live in cities built on land the Mexica reclaimed from a lake. Civilizations, it turns out, are harder to erase than the people who erase them believe. But the warning is this. No civilization is destroyed only from the outside. The Spanish did not conquer the Aztec Empire. They conquered an empire that had already made tens of thousands of its own subjects into willing partners in its destruction. Every empire that falls leaves the same clue behind. Look for the people who were supposed to defend it. And didn't. Moctezuma said 3 words. But the empire had been saying them. In 100 different ways, to 100 different peoples. For 100 years before he did. You are not one of us. You exist to serve us. Your resentment is not our problem. Until the day it was.